began our meeting last night, recessed. One good reason was to have Ken here after discussing with our council. I'm sorry? I think so. It's supposed to get. I want to just start with some general comments about what we're doing here and what the state board has been doing and what we're required to do under our statutes and procedures. General Statute Section 163A 1115 states that the state board shall certify optical scan voting systems, optical scan with ballot marking devices, and DRE voting systems if they produce a paper ballot in accordance with procedures set forth by the state board. The current election system certification program was adopted by the state board and became effective January 31, 2017. It was amended by this board on June 13, 2019. The vendors that have been involved in this submitted their product for state certification as follows. ES&S submitted EVS 5.2.2.0 for state certification on February 28, 2017. Hart InterCivic submitted Verity Voting 2.2 for state certification on May 22, 2017. Clear Ballot submitted Clear Vote 1.4 for state certification on September 27, 2017. Certification procedures were followed, including a public demonstration and public comment period in 2018. While all aspects of the certification process had been completed, a final recommendation by the executive director was not made to the board for various reasons, and the board did not consider certifying vendors until its meeting last month. The reasons for the delay included the lack of an appointed board for approximately 280 days over the past few years, as well as litigation over the reorganization of the state board. Because the certification process had been completed by each of the vendors and the due diligence of the state board, our new executive director recommended or recognized that she had a responsibility to make a recommendation to the board. While certification of any voting system is made by determining it meets the defined requirements, there are other considerations of additional factors outside of the voting system certification process that require us to make a decision on this promptly. And I would ask our executive director if she would go through some of these additional factors now.
Certainly. Is that better? Okay, thank you. So there Is that better? That's better. Thank you. Two main types of voting systems are currently used in North Carolina: optical scan tabulators and direct record electronic DRE machines, which are also tabulators. DREs in North Carolina produce a voter viewable paper audit trail next to the touchscreen, but the paper tapes have proven difficult to audit, and concerns about the security of these machines have been raised in North Carolina and other states. Optical scanners work like Scantrons. Once a voter makes a selection on a paper ballot, it is inserted into the tabulator and tabulated. The results are stored on a PCMCIA card located inside of the machine. DREs, or touchscreens, allow the voter to select their choices on a screen and verify their selections on the screen and an adjacent paper tape. DRE tabulates the results, which are then stored on a flashcard device. DRE decertification. The necessity to consider certification of the state of North Carolina law. In 2013 and 2015, the legislature passed laws prohibiting the use of DREs that do not produce paper ballots. Session Law 2018-13 extended the phase-out to December 1, 2019 for all counties in North Carolina. For all elections beginning in 2020, the voting system must generate a paper ballot. We must also consider accessibility. Federal law requires that each voting place have an accessible voting option for voters with disabilities. The only accessible voting systems currently certified for use in North Carolina are the Ivotronic DRE, which cannot be used after 2019, and the Automark. The Automark is no longer manufactured, and only a limited number of used units are available for lease or purchase at this time. We are also must comply with the federal law that requires a voter to vote independently if they so choose. That's part of the accessibility requirements. No matter the system certified by the state board, additional steps must be taken before the voting system can be used in any election. So even upon your decision tonight, these steps will include the vendor's obligation to post a bond or letter of credit to cover damages resulting from defects in the voting system, witness of a demonstration by the County Board of Elections of the system be recommended, and a demonstration of at least one other system, recommendation by the County Board of Elections to the Board of County Commissioners, and then test by the County Board of Elections during an election of the proposed voting system in at least one precinct, and all of this will include acceptance testing of the system. With any system in North Carolina, they must follow certain safeguards. No voting system in North Carolina, those currently used or those being considered, they cannot be connected to the internet at any point. All voting systems before every election must undergo what we call logic and accuracy testing to ensure functionality and proper tabulation and accuracy of the vote. Following every election as well, counties are required to conduct post-election audits, including a sample hand-to-eye audit that is considered statistically significant, and the potential is there that we can move forward with risk-limiting audits with the right voting equipment systems. The window of time to meet these requirements that I outlined outside of the safeguards are always in place. The window of time to meet these requirements is fast approaching, particularly if the Ivotronics, which serve as the voting system and ADA compliant units for more than 2.4 million voters in our state, are decertified in December. So the counties must go through the steps that we outlined. In the given period of time, they would have, if the DREs are decertified, then we are looking at the need for them to test in the November election. And in order to be compliant with our UOCAVA ballot and our coding that's necessary to meet our time frame for the one-stop period, then that is also a September time frame in order to be prepared for a November test election.
And do you recommend that the board approve and certify these 3 voting systems we have before us tonight?
Based on the criteria outlined in our certification program and the information that's been presented to us, the state board staff and I have found that they meet our evaluation and criteria, and therefore I can make recommendation of all 3 systems that have been put forward.
And And if the 3 systems are certified, does the county have to buy all 3 of the systems?
No, sir. No, sir. At that point, what the state board is doing is saying that these systems meet the certification standards set forth by our state, which include not only state requirements, but federal requirements through the Election Assistance Commission. So this would then, in addition to the systems already certified, the counties would then choose among the certified systems, and they would go through the steps that we've outlined, including the voting system companies would need to get the bond, and I mentioned the demonstration of the equipment, including the one that they are considering, and another recommendation to the county commissioners. The test in an election before they do a full procurement, and the acceptance testing that's required.
Caitlin, I believe you've had some communication with various people, Department of Homeland Security, I believe, and perhaps some others, about the information we obtained after our last meeting from these various vendors. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. At its June 13th meeting, the state board voted to modify or clarify in its certification program one requirement in particular and related to ownership. And the change that was made was to request from all vendors seeking certification that they disclose any owners or shareholders with a 5% or greater interest or share in each of the vendor's company, any subsidiary company of the vendor, or the vendor's parent company. We requested this information from all 3 vendors, and when we received the information, we provided it to the Department of Homeland Security for their review. The Department of Homeland Security reviewed the information and consulted with other intelligence agencies as needed. They did not identify any red flags as to foreign ownership. Their review included the individuals identified as owners or investors in the vendors that were provided to them. The review also included unidentified individual investors in the parent investment companies as well. The Department of Homeland Security included the caveat that their review was based on current information in their possession or other intelligence agencies' possession, but based on that information, they did not identify any red flags.
Thank you, ma'am. Does anybody want to proceed with a motion at this time? Stella?
I would like to just make one clarification. I got asked this today by members of county boards. So if a county currently uses hand-marked paper ballots and the currently certified scanner and uses the AutoMark as their ADA compliant option, they're not in a position to have to make any changes or make any new purchases.
That is correct.
Right.
The action you may or may not take tonight does not decertify anything that's in use
Right.
by the county.
Right.
And the only aspect of decertification is the decertification of the DREs by statute. So a county that has a certified voting system, and the optical scan, the M100 or DS200 and the AutoMark, they may proceed forward and are in compliance.
Right. I have some general comments and I also have a motion to make, but I don't want to, step in before others want to make comments. I think it's important that we help those in attendance, those listening to the meeting, understand what all we took into consideration before we, make our final determination about certification or not for any of the vendors. So I think it's important that we try to speak to that beyond the comments that have been made.
You may proceed.
Okay, all right. Well, I think I can safely speak for all the board members in saying that voter trust and confidence in the security and the integrity of any voting system that we put in use in North Carolina is absolutely vital. And I think that has been paramount with all board members as we've considered these decisions. Part of promoting that confidence in these election systems, these voting systems, requires that voters are able to verify their choices and know those choices are what are tabulated by the equipment or the machine. And this process of voter verification is imperative to our hand-eye post-election audits, which are required by law, and which also feed back into the confidence that the voting public can have in the outcome of these elections. This issue, I think, is one of the primary concerns that we've heard from hundreds of voters who have advocated for hand-marked ballots. We've heard that very clearly, or some that have advocated that we make criteria to ensure the ability of the voter. This is particularly as it relates to using a ballot marking device, the ability of the voter to verify their choices and know that those choices are what is going to be tabulated. We do have some additional considerations. As Karen, the executive director, mentioned, the 20-some counties that must replace the iVotronic DRE and must be able to be in a position to provide an ADA compliant option. So there will be some ballot marking devices in use. It might be the Automark, or it might be a different option that might get certified. But there will be ballot marking devices in use if for the voters that need assistance, even if not other voters, even if other voters hand mark their ballots. I also think that it's important to make clear that our current certification program standards and requirements were developed in essentially 2015 and 2016, and that a prior state board adopted those, and they were in effect in January of 2017. And if we think about all that has transpired and all that we know now that could not have been foreseen when those standards were developed and put into place starting in January of 2017, I think most of us understand that there are a number of concerns that have come to light that we know we're dealing with now that we did not know we were dealing with, or not to the degree that we were in 2015 or even 2016. And cybersecurity, for one, would be right up there. So in light of all of this, I believe it is incumbent on us to modify our certification program and specify the requirements for any ballot marking device for recording the voter's selection. This would require, according to the statutes, providing a 15-day notice of a state board meeting to consider this type of modification, any such modification to the certification program requirements. So I move that the state board notice a meeting to occur not earlier than 15 days after the state board gives notice of the meeting to consider modification of its election systems certification program to add a section as follows. And this would be section 3.4.2.12, recording of voters' selection. And that modification would be as follows. An electronically assisted ballot marking device or other ballot marking equipment shall produce human readable marks on a paper ballot. The voter must be able to verify his or her intent as evidenced by the mark on the ballot. The mark shall be tabulated as the voter's selection.
Would you repeat that, please?
Sure. So this type of modification, if we were to go forward with considering it, requires a meeting that's noticed for at least 15 days once notice is given. So the motion is actually to choose a date that we can meet and provide 15 days notice to the public of the meeting to consider the modification as I outlined. I think, do you want me to reread
Yes.
the modification? Okay. So this would be to add a section to that election system certification program. Sections 3.4.2.12, recording of voters' selection, and it would be as follows. An electronically assisted ballot marking device or other ballot marking equipment shall produce human readable marks on a paper ballot. The voter must be able to verify his or her as the voter's selection.
I'll second that motion with the comment. I have heard from all of you that sent your emails, made your phone calls, and all day I have toyed with one phrase, and that's "we the people." And as I processed that and read through your emails, I realized that there's a group of you that can change our country. With that in mind, I want to do all that we can to restore the faith in our voting system and get to a point where we can say "we the people" with confidence.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, sir.
If I understand the motion, I'm going to vote against the motion because if I understand it correctly, and I tried to take notes as you were talking, you're asking for a motion to choose a date to consider modification of the section of certification of a ballot marking device that shall produce a human mark. That, if I understand it correctly, that's a bit too confusing. A ballot marking device that will produce a human mark? Is that what you said? An electronically assisted ballot marking device or other ballot marking equipment shall produce human readable marks. Okay. On a paper ballot. Okay, thank you very much.
Is there any further discussion on this motion? Okay, all those in further discussion, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
No. The ayes will carry, and this meeting will then be continued, or I guess the meeting will end now. We have to wait till we give notice before we can move forward with certification.
Sir, could the people who voted aye repeat it, just for staff to have that down?
Aye.
Aye.
That's David Black,
So-
Stella Anderson, Jeff Farmer.
Yes.
So today's vote delays further certification?
Yes. It can't go forward until we can have a meeting after 15 days notice, the official 15-day notice. Am I correct? Okay.
That's correct, sir. Staff will work with the board members to quickly determine a date when all 5 members would be available for that meeting.
And I would urge that we think about noticing something that's as close to August 15th as possible so that we meet the notification requirements, but we don't let too much more time elapse.
I have August 13th as the 15th, that's 15 days.
I have 4 on that day.
I'll get in touch with you to schedule that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may, I didn't know. I'm glad I voted no for it. I think that, we have counties that are looking at decertification of equipment, of voting equipment. We have vendors who have been in this process for several years and have run a virtual gauntlet of requirements to be here at this point. And for us, I think to delay it even further, that's not the right thing to do. That's all. The vote is the vote. We've cast a vote, but I just wanted to say that.
Mr. Raymond, I agree with you, and we don't always agree, but I think the counties are going to be running into a real problem with our certification and with their abilities to get any machines, voting systems they need. But the vote's the vote, and we'll move forward with that. Is there any further?
I'd like to respond to my fellow member to let him know that this wasn't taken lightly. Our state's been in the media enough. And after the Mueller report and the latest report on all that's happening with voting systems, I think we all have a duty to make sure that we've dotted every I and crossed every possible T possible. And I feel I can rest well with my vote.
No problem. If there's no further discussion, we will.
One quick comment. The statute clearly requires if we're going to make this modification to defining what constitutes a vote and how a vote would be counted, that we must notice the meeting. It does add 2+ weeks to our process, but we have to get this right. We have to get this right.
If I could add for just anyone listening or present, the statute being referenced is 163A-1166, subsection B. Thank you.
Mr. Director, is there anything further you need tonight? Do I hear a motion?
Yes,
I'll
sir.
move that we move that the meeting be adjourned. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.